Hi everyone, welcome to the Luchi and Mutton's podcast. I am Surabhi, your host, and I run Luchi and Mutton's Dog Behavior and Nutrition, a canine care practice that is based out of India. I work with dog parents across the world to help them meet their dog's behavior and dietary needs. Welcome to the podcast after a really long unintended break. But I think the break was super helpful because it gave me time to think about what were the conversations that I wanted to have and invite you to be a part of. So I'm really excited to announce a series of conversations that are going to be featured on this platform for the next couple of weeks. And really, the series is going to deep dive into how capitalism and other systems that are part of our society really influence the way that we show up for our dogs and influence our dog parenting styles. I think this conversation on intersectionality is a really important one, something that we don't necessarily think about on a day-to-day basis, but it impacts so much of who we are with our dogs and also how we show up for them. And so I really hope that you enjoy this series and that it adds a lot of value to wherever you are in your journey with dog parenting. I wanted to kickstart the series by talking about something that I think is really important to our well-being, welfare, health, and for our dogs as well, and that is the importance of rest. And so in this conversation today, Sowjanya and Eva, who are fellow BHARCS graduates and run their own canine consulting practices, details of which are there in the episode description, join me to talk about grind culture, rest, and how all of that impacts the way we are and show up for our dogs. I really hope you enjoy this conversation. Let me know what resonated with you, stayed with you, what were some aha moments you had, or questions that you'd like for us to explore in a little bit more depth in the comments section on any of the platforms that you are listening to this podcast on. Have a lovely listen, and I will see you super soon with a new episode in this brand new series on the Luchi and Mutton's podcast. Hi, Sowjanya. Hi, Eva.
Hi.
How is
Hi.
it going?
I thought you said don't laugh.
No, you're allowed to laugh.
And you
allowed to
started.
laugh. Yeah.
No.
You're allowed to laugh. I allow it.
How are we doing? I mean, we have been meeting almost every weekend.
Every weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doing good. How are you?
I'm great. It's all great.
I haven't seen you for so long, my
I know.
goodness.
It's just been really long. It's just
Yeah.
been really long. Yeah, absolutely. Eva is just like, when do I add to this chaos? But here's my official welcome to Eva, the Luchi and Mutton's podcast.
Yes, it's my
Yeah.
first time. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, the podcast just has me. So, welcome to my space. Sowjanya has been on the podcast before. And I think when she came on, we spoke about gentle parenting. And so, huge shift from gentle parenting to what we're getting into today, but not also completely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see where it takes us.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah,
It sounds
Yeah.
so professional.
I
We
know.
will see.
We'll see where
Yeah.
it takes us.
Let's circle back to this after some time. Yeah, so I mean, I just wanted to sort of set the context a little bit because I think this has been like a thread of conversation that I've wanted to do for a while, which has really been about how capitalism, very specifically as a system, impacts us, but also impacts our relationship with our dogs. I feel like the recent conversation in the dog centered group about intersectionality also sort of shed some light on that. But I also recognize that some of these conversations have so much nuance that, Instagram, for example, doesn't do justice really to capturing some of that nuance. And I feel like this is just a larger dialogue. And so I felt like the podcast was a great place to do it. But I also didn't want to like ramble away by myself for really long. I thought we could make this an entertaining experience by getting more people to ramble together. And so I'm really glad that I have the two of you to ramble with. But yeah, I'm interested to deep dive into this and see, I think, how just like this sub series of the podcast sort of evolves and emerges. And so today I'd love to just sort of deep dive a little bit into the idea of like rest and how that exists within a capitalist system. And basically, what I'm hoping to do is with every conversation that we have as part of the series, like pick a different theme to, really like dissect and get a sense of. So thank you so much for just being part of this space. And it goes without saying, I wouldn't have this conversation with anybody else but y'all. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Oh, this is so sweet. Thank you.
Eva was very truly like being like, oh, very sweet. I was like, oh, like, thank you.
Yeah,
But
and
I know I'm great. Thank you. Thank you.
yeah, like it was almost, there was like almost like passive aggression undertone there. Because Sowjanya in her head is like, if you would have this conversation with anybody else except me, part of it, she and I would be having a different conversation altogether.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, because you
I'm scared
now
of the
know.
straight-faced response to that.
See, I'm learning this because
Mm.
now, like corporate and whatnot, right?
Mm.
But
Surabhi said that we are not
Yeah.
allowed to laugh because she has
One
then
second.
has to edit it.
Yeah.
But we are laughing like the
Yeah.
whole time.
I can't
so
edit
I'm
this.
sorry.
you
I'm
Yeah.
can't.
sorry,
Yeah,
Surabhi.
Yeah.
I don't
can't.
think you can edit it, and I think the essence of the podcast is this.
Yeah, and this is the advantage of having like a video podcast, right? People experience this side of us as well, and so that's great.
Yeah, because I think people think we're all like always
Yeah.
serious. I guess I don't know.
Yeah.
At least I am.
Maybe.
Yeah. But to be honest, you have heard this, like both of you have heard this, like me saying that this is a crazy, like this is the idea I am very crazy about, like the intersectionality. And we didn't get a chat about capitalism, in our last week's talk. So I think this is a great one.
Yeah, awesome. So let's get right into it.
Yeah, I think we are done laughing, so I think we'll get into the topic, I guess.
Don't say that.
Yeah, I think like my partner always says, the more you laugh, actually that's also very complicated. The more you laugh, the more it's telling of how much you're going to cry later.
Oh no.
And so I feel like as we get into the depths of the episode today, we're going to experience like a roller coaster of emotions.
Is this what you're like prepping your viewers and listeners for?
No,
like,
not at all. This is going to be a great, insightful, thought-provoking episode with
and fun, a lot of laughs.
Yeah, absolutely, with bursts of laughter, hopefully at appropriate times. And
But then we will all cry at the end, right?
Aren't we all crying all the time anyway?
Yeah, exactly.
Tears are rolling down my eyes as I say that. But okay, let's get into it. And so I wanted to actually, I had a couple of things that I wanted to sort of speak about, a couple of themes, larger questions that I wanted to explore with you all. So I'm going to start with the first question that was on my mind, which is, why do we find it so hard to rest? Like, why is that something that feels like so much of a resistance?
That's a question that I didn't think about for a long time, because I always thought about myself like more of a lazy person, right? Not very productive. Because I think now, because mainly like my productivity was not necessarily connected to money, right? So I thought that I'm not like this productive person that's always on a go, go, go. But when I started working, for 5 years, I think I didn't take any vacation. And when I finally did, then I noticed that I don't know how to rest, because then I had like this free time and I was just thinking, okay, what am I going to do now? Okay, like this needs cleaning. Okay, I need to go like to the garden. So I didn't even think about, I thought that I was resting, but in fact I was not. So that's a very good question to start with.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Eva. Soj?
Yeah, I think what Eva mentioned one is I think there's like it comes across as lazy when you're not productive. And even I think rest has been like if I think of sleep itself, right? Like we have gone from like 8 9 hours of sleep, and then now to like 7 hours or 6 hours is okay, like 5 hours should do. And people like glorifying 70 hours work week and things like that. I think rest is seen almost like uh you become not valuable. Like when you're resting a lot more, you're not valuable to people around you, to the economy, to your country. And I think that's one part of it, which I think capitalism is what we are talking about, and I think that is one part of it. But I also was thinking when you shared these are the things that you want to talk about, I was wondering, and one of the two other themes came to my mind, right? One was patriarchy, because women find
Yeah.
it so hard to rest, because I think culturally we are rewarded for
Yeah.
the amount of work we do in terms of towards the family, taking care, the caregiving tasks. um, in fact, today, even with feminism and women working, we are rewarded for the fact that we can manage work and home together. So that where does it, where does rest fit in then? If we
Yeah.
are doing so much of work and we are valued because of the work that we do, then where does rest fit in? So patriarchy was the other thing that I was thinking about, and the other was ableism, right? Because even the three of us sitting here are not the same in terms of our abilities and our capabilities, in terms of how much physical effort we can put, how much emotional bandwidth we have, and that doesn't stay same even like going from one phase of life to another, right? But it's expected of us to like give in the same amount of work every single time. And the moment we might need rest, or like we want to take a step back, it's again not seen well. And I think all of it ties back to capitalism, because your productivity or your value, I think, is tied to how much you're working and how much of yourself you're giving, and not like taking a step back and giving yourself time. So I think those are few things that was coming to my mind when you like shared what you
Yeah.
plan to talk.
Yeah. No, I think makes a lot of sense. And I feel like I think you can't talk about why it's hard to rest without acknowledging the grind culture that capitalism sets, like sows the seeds for, really. And I think when you look at capitalism, when you look at the grind culture specifically, right? Because I also do want to acknowledge that there are lots of benefits that we enjoy of capitalism, right? So it's not a black and white kind of situation where we're saying, we're anti-capitalist, it just doesn't work for us. We also reap the benefits of that. But I think very specifically with this grind culture that is that product of capitalism, I think the ultimate assumption really is that we're all machines. And so when we talk about productivity, and I think I love what Eva shared about productivity versus laziness, right? When we talk about productivity, it's not really about what is productivity looking like from a point of view of an individualized capacity, but it is really looking at what is an output I'm expecting of a view. Like there is that very mechanistic view to human beings within the system. And within that system, there is no scope for rest and recreation. There is no scope for slowness, because you're expected to just keep delivering output and output and output. And I think that what happens as a result of that grind culture is also that rest almost feels like something you have to earn, that you have to be worthy of, and that you have to justify, right? So you need to justify that I have spent, let's say, the last 3 months working really hard on a particular project, or done X amount, logged in X amount of hours. And so now I have earned this amount of rest.
But I also think that there's a paradox to it, again, because we also don't know how to rest.
Exactly. Yes.
And
exactly.
so when there is an opportunity to rest, we're like, what are we really supposed to do?
Yeah.
Right? I also think that it's really interesting, right? Because I also think that there's a sense of rest that has also been described as this very like luxurious sense of rest. So resting, means, oh, we take a holiday someplace, right? And it requires us to engage in certain kinds of experiences to be restful, which weirdly like fuels that whole capitalist piece all over again. So I also feel like there's just a complete breakdown of what does rest look like at both a systemic but also an individual level. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just like thinking when you were the last bit that you were talking about, that you have to again spend money in order to properly rest. And then if you are a person who doesn't have like that amount of money, are you then pressured to not rest at all because that's your definition of rest? And then you are in this vicious cycle where you never take a break. Or for example, you do take a break, how you are supposed to. So let's say go to this luxurious resort, but that's not what you want to do. So then again, you are not resting, right? You are like under this like pressure to conform to some like idea of rest that is not the idea of rest for you. Is that making sense? Because I think like I'm
Yeah.
running in circles, but
Yeah.
then you don't rest.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was also thinking, I mean, when you said we don't know how to rest, this is the other thing that was coming into my mind, right? I feel like we are so overwhelmed with um, work and like external stimulation and our emotions that I think to like take a pause, like in general, not even like a rest or a break, so to say, but like take a pause. And I think we're so scared of that also. Like if I were to, decide to keep all my devices away for 5 minutes and just sit, not doing anything, that can get so overwhelming because we don't know what to do. I think our generation and the generations after us um, have also grown up a little bit with the internet, world, as well as in an urbanized world where, we are sheltered so much in terms of our interactions outdoors. I don't know if Eva can relate to this, but Surbi, I'm sure you will be able to relate to it. Where when we were younger, we would go out and like play with the kids around the block and like um, be out and about, not wanting to be around gadgets. It can be TV, it can be computer and things like that. Today, it's so hard if we were to like just take a step back and then just pause. And I think we don't know what to do in the pause, not even a rest or not even like a break, but we don't even know how to pause. And I think the idea of rest becomes overwhelming itself, right? Because we don't know what to do with a break, like how Eva initially mentioned. uh, the other thing that kind of came into my mind was, I know we're talking about like rest as in breaks, but how useful it is to take rest as breaks. Like as you mentioned, Surbi, like we're so into this grind culture, this hustle culture, that we work a lot for a particular period and then earn that break, and we go on that break. But how effective is that break going to be? Because we also studied this as part of our backbred curriculum, right? Why We Sleep was one of the books that we all read, and he talks about how you are perpetually in sleep debt, right? Even if you have one night of less sleep or sleep deprivation, it's not like you can make up for it over the weekend. You are running in sleep debt, and you can never make up for that lost sleep. So you're accumulating your your loss of rest, and we believe that okay, a break is going to give us that that rejuvenation, but really how effective it is in terms of a long term well-being.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I think you start seeing like multiple things play out, right? I think again, going back to something that you said in just a couple of minutes ago, which is about like women also struggling to rest, like the amount of emotional and domestic labor that they take on, which goes completely unrecognized, unacknowledged, unpaid, completely, right? Um, over and above any other form of productive, stereotypes that they need to fit in, it's very hard to take a break from that. It's very hard to pause. I feel like so many of us, so many women are just conditioned to believe that the world is going to come crashing down if they are not carrying the burdens of holding that world together. And that's a very difficult burden to shed. But I also think, and so I think there's that part of gender. I also think I really love what you talked about, Sarge, in terms of dependence on internet, dependence on device, dependence on this overwhelm of stimulation. Because when you speak about us, for example, our generation going out playing with kids, I also very clearly imagine park spaces. I also imagine greenery, right? I also imagine free space that is not constantly in struggle with development and modernization and urbanization, which I do think it's very hard to find in some of our cities today, especially in the city that I live in, because every green space seems to have been occupied or is in the process of occupying, which again has such a huge impact on our own stress and anxiety levels and cortisol levels and all of that, right? So I feel like that's a loop there as well. And then I think that what I have learned to, or what I've started acknowledging is that our inability to take a pause, our inability to rest is also like a trauma response. We've been traumatized, and I think there's no other way to describe the impact of that. I think we've been traumatized by these capitalist systems that continuously perpetuate this very mechanistic view of how we need to operate. And so I think that I resonate with these moments where when we are trying to rest or are trying to take a pause, like there's anxiety,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
There's
Yes,
so much.
like you are doing something wrong, like that
Exactly. Absolutely. Like you have to really like, I feel like for me, like I've had to like really self-talk a lot to be like, no, this is fine. This is okay. This is fine. I am allowed to like leave my phone aside. I'm allowed to not think about some of these things. But I think that's like, to me, there's no other better way to describe it than a trauma response, right? And I think it again competes with this idea. And I read this really lovely quote that said that this culture of laziness is actually a tool that's imposed by our oppressors, right? And so what is really laziness versus being conscious about resting with versus like productivity and a certain idea of what that productivity looks like? Yeah. Y'all are here.
Yeah, I think you froze.
Yeah. I'm here.
Welcome back.
Thanks. My internet was like, bro, take a beat.
Rest.
Yeah, rest.
No, but I don't know for you two, but when I was little, like my parents, and like they didn't mean anything wrong by it, because I think this idea of constant productivity is so like intertwined in our society, but it was always like when I was resting, it was, oh, you should be doing this, or you should clean your room, or you will rest when you do XYZ. So yeah, I think like we've grown up with it, and I think the generations before us had it even worse, because I know, especially for people here that live on farms, they have to be productive, like from when the sun goes up until the sun goes down, and it's yeah, you are not supposed to rest, because I don't know exactly why. When you think about it, right? Like, what will happen if you rest? Nothing terrible, actually.
Yeah, and I think it's such a great point, because I do feel like that's also what comes in the way of very actively thinking about rest, because I feel like there is a sense that our survival is at stake if we're not productive in the terms that are laid out for us. And I don't think that that's necessarily in our heads. I feel like that's a very real uh that's a very real fear to exist with. But I think it's important to also acknowledge that that's also how these systems play to that fear, you know. And I think, like, for me as well, I think like 2 years ago, when I was deciding to sort of quit my full-time corporate stint, I think I had the hardest time ever. Like, it was just so much anxiety, because I think I was battling both questions of, have I really earned this life that I'm envisioning, where I'm allowed to slow down, especially when, let's say, I see my parents working really hard and like still being part of that grind culture, right? So what gives me the right to be like, screw it, I'm not doing this anymore, right? But also at the same time, I think holding that very important question of, oh my God, like, how will I survive, right?
Yeah.
And I think that fear is also so real, because it is hard to survive in today's day and age. I feel like we can't ignore that. I feel like, and I think it's, you talked about like a vicious cycle, and I think this is the vicious cycle, right? Like, look at inflation costs, look at how expensive things have become. And I think that we're forced to choose between a meaningful life and a life where we have no meaning. You
Oh
know,
my God. Yes.
and
Oh my God.
that's such a hard question to like hold.
Yeah. I mean, now that I've transitioned back into like corporate as well, I can see um how we can't escape the capitalistic structures. We can't escape this. Um but there's also no way to make it work for us, especially if we are like, I know what I was trading when I was getting into this, right? I knew that I was giving up that life that I had, where I could choose to slow down when I wanted to, like I could like hustle when I wanted to. I could have a very flexible, life as I wanted. But it also meant that I didn't get to afford the things that I wanted, right? And to be honest, rest is not that easy either, in terms of like the affordability of rest, right? I'm not even talking about like whether we earned it or not, in terms of the larger, like the philosophical question, but like wanting to rest means that um if I were to not be working and I'm resting, then my partner takes up the the expenses, right? And that means that what kind of a lifestyle then we are looking for? Can I afford to have a dog if I were to like choose to not work and choose to rest? Right? These are few questions that really like come up. And it did come up for me, like, when I was not, I was doing just the consulting bit. I was not in the corporate structure, and Sammy fell sick, and that was the thing that we hadn't planned for in terms of the medical bills. Like, imagine like not having planned for your dog's medical care. And then you realize that yes, money is damn important, and I know I'm trading my rest time for that money. And I think that's a hard one, But as you rightly said, we live in a world, in systems where, I mean, to be honest, three of us can sit and talk over here. It's not like we're, like completely smashing down the capitalistic world, right? So
Isn't this
imagine,
what we're gonna do with this episode?
what is this, Eva? You didn't know what was the purpose of this episode?
Where's your hammer, Eva? I'm not seeing a hammer anywhere. Yeah.
So, but like, yeah, I mean, I think when we are, it's just that, I'm now trading it with a lot of awareness. That's it, right? Like, before it was more, or like a lot of people go through that grind, not being fully self-aware of what they're giving up. Now I know, and then I'm giving it up, right? It's not a great place to be in, but still that there's a amount of awareness of what we're giving up while we're practicing and being part of the systems that are actually like reaching out everything from us.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that because, you know, I think there's awareness for sure, but I think what that awareness also comes with, which at least that was true for me, is a sense of agency that I think that I lost out on when I was pushed into the system early on. Right. So, when I started working, I was like, what, 20, maybe like a little before that. And so I subscribed to the system the way that I did. Like, there was no concept of what does it mean to exercise agency? What does it mean to exercise flexibility or autonomy? Any of those conversations. Right. And I think that in life, I just hit a burnout a couple of years ago where I was just like, I can't do this anymore. And I need to feel more in control of my life. And I think to what you said, South, like, I think that awareness also comes with, I'm aware of this, and now can I make a choice to do what I need to do versus feeling like I have no choice,
Yeah.
versus not like, it's almost like you were on autopilot, but now you're a little bit more informed, and so
Yeah.
you are able to like exercise lots of things, and tell me if like this resonates. I also feel like the structure that you have picked for yourself is a structure that offers a little bit more flexibility as compared to, let's say, like a very traditional corporate organization, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
I think that was a very conscious choice that I made, right? Which is what you were pointing to, which is
Yeah.
now that I was coming back into it. Oh, what are you drinking?
It's Coke. I have been drinking it now 3 times in the conversation. I was like, what happened? Wow.
It looked like a wine glass, and I was like, "Oh, you're
No,
already
it's
like."
it's a stemless wine glass. Thanks to capitalism, but it's got Coke in it. Yeah, moving on.
Okay, back to what we were talking about. Now that I was like returning into corporate, I knew firstly, and I was also coming back with a lot of awareness about what we do get through backward, right? I learned a lot about like connection, slowing down, resting, relationship building, all of this, right? So when I was coming back into it, I was quite cognizant of the fact that I knew what I was trading, but I also picked a place that worked for me, uh, and also to build the kind of lifestyle I wanted to for myself, but also for my dogs, right? So I think that's the maximum balance I think I can afford, given that I know what I'm trading. I know that I'm losing out on the amount of rest I had before, um, the choice to do what I want to do with my day. And I think that's the best we can do. Like knowing what we're giving up. And also now I can choose my rest also. Like, not that I'm great at resting. That's a whole other conversation altogether. But like I can choose to take breaks, and I can afford the breaks, right? Like when I say afford, again, I mean financially afford those breaks, right? And I think that puts us in a space of, okay, fine, like now I can also take a step back. I don't have to think so much about, okay, when can I take a break? Can I take a break or not? Kind of a thing. Because to be honest, even when I was having a very flexible work, it's not like it was rest.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
also an important point, right? It was not like it was rest. It was still work, and I feel like it was a lot more work back then, because like managing an entire business all by yourself is not less work, but that was work that we chose. But also then we are trading off the financial, the security that comes along with it. So I think this is what I mean. We have subscribed to involuntarily the capitalistic
Yeah.
systems. So we have to then figure out how to make it work for us within the system. Not that it's great for us, but we do with whatever we get.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so that's a great way to segue into like how do you think like this idea or this struggle that we have with rest, where we know that it's important but we also struggle to do it, how do you think like that influences the way that we share space with our dogs?
I think this we can talk a lot.
We can talk a lot about anything and everything.
Eva, you want to go first?
Yeah, I was thinking about that because I never had like a problem with my dogs resting. It was like always so nice to watch them like sleep or do nothing. But I don't know if that's because I'm not like a very active person, like a person who would go like running or like different sports activities. So yeah, I always envied my dogs for resting. Like they are the masters of it, right? If we let them. So yeah, I personally never had an issue with that. I wanted to be like them. Like, tell me your secret. What are you doing?
But Eva, tell me, like, do you see like others around you, especially because now you're also consulting, right, with dog parents? Do you see like that coming up as a
Yes.
thing? Yeah.
Yes.
So what do you see in that context?
I remember when we had to do a case study, and this woman, like bless her soul, when I was talking to her, like taking like shorter walks, doing less of like this activities with dogs, she was like looking at me like she was so skeptical. But she was like, okay, I will try it, but I think my dog will be so bored and she will not be able to like relax because we didn't go on this 3-hour long walk. And we catch up like 6 weeks after, and she was like, oh my God, this is a totally different dog. She was not bored. She was not like overexcited. She actually calmed down. And I think that's like uh, an idea that we like, it's not resonating. Like doing less makes you more calm, like because you have to like tire yourself out to like calm down. So yeah, I definitely see that like difficulty in accepting resting in dogs.
Yeah. Were
Sowj.
you looking at me?
Yeah, always looking at you.
I feel so special. So I think one is obviously what Eva mentioned, which is, not being able to believe that when you reduce activity, or the active time, that our dogs would tend to like start being more regulated than before. And I think it comes from us, right? Because we haven't known how to do less, and we haven't known how to reduce and slow down. And I think we can't see that, you know um, happening for dogs. But the other thing I think is also, um, like this constant need to do something with our dogs as well, like from our end, like even when the dogs want to take a step back and rest, even when they want to take a break, this need to like constantly like train them and then like do activities with them. And this is not even from the point of view of training, but also like even when, I don't know, Surbhi and Eva, if you have had experience like this, but even when we talk about, let's say for example, sniffing or like enrichment, one goes back and then they are like doing like sniffing and enrichment the entire day with the dogs, like one after the other, right? This constant need to be like, oh, I need to do this with my dog. The moment, like for example, I can almost see this happening with people, which is the dog is sleeping, all great. The moment the dog gets up, you have to like do something with the dog, like like not like letting them take a beat and a moment to just be able to say, okay, fine, like what do you want to do? Do you just want to like get up and go back to sleep? Is that what you're looking for, right? But no, like this constant, the moment your dog is like awake, you have to fill that time with some activity or the other. And I can almost see this happen with kids, right? Like how Eva pointed out before, which is and I'm sure Surbi, you'll also relate with this. When we were kids, like school, and then tuitions, and then this activity and that activity and whatnot, right? So this constant need to like fill the time with something, right? And I think again it comes from us. There was one more point which I'll tell, which I can't remember now, but you can go on and then I'll tell you whenever it comes back.
Yeah.
I think it's like we feel, or people feel guilty that they are not like good dog parents, dog guardians, if they are not constantly doing something with their dog. And I think like a lot of people are under a lot of pressure to be good dog parents. And with all the like bullshit, I don't know if you have to edit this out, circling like the internet, the social media, like people want to do right by their dogs, and it's sad because like there's so much very stupid information out there.
No, absolutely. And I agree with both of you, and I particularly agree with the fact that so many of these notions are coming from us, right? So this whole idea of busyness being equal to productivity, or busyness being meaningful, is again something that humans carry, right? And again, I think you see the roots of that within that grind culture. You see the roots of that within what that systemic view of how apparently humans are supposed to operate, right? Like the fact that if you are still, if there is silence, or if you're not doing anything, you're being wasteful. Like this whole concept of wastefulness versus resourcefulness is also built on that idea, right? Like what is the value add that you're actually making to a larger system? So I definitely feel like that sense of busyness comes in. I'm also thinking about the fact that we have such a hard time slowing down, and we have such a hard time in stillness, right? Where there is so much anxiety. I feel like that anxiety also extends to our dogs, to being like, oh my God, like you're still, like, what does that mean? Like, aren't you supposed to do something? Like, shouldn't we do something? Like, are you okay being still? Like, if you're okay being still, am I okay being still? Like, I feel like there's so many layers and nuances to what we feel, even in the presence of our dog's restfulness, that so many of the times like we can't even acknowledge, right? Because it's so like subconscious. And then I think it's this definition of like lazy. And I think that that's such a big one. Like it's such a big one. I think there's so much like shame and judgment around the word laziness. And so to accept that you have a dog who's being lazy, and exactly to what Eva said, is accepting that you're not doing a good enough job of who you are as a dog parent. And like I have had to very explicitly in my consultations like tell people dogs are lazy animals. Can we just accept that? Right? That might make you uncomfortable, but get over it. Obviously, I say it with much more compassion and patience and empathy. But I'm just like,
Maybe. I think we need a new word for laziness, because laziness is so like such a negative word, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like I think like Bhadra's study again is such a great example of that, right? Like where we see dogs spending such a big chunk of their time just in that state of inactivity. And I love the word inactivity, right?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't mean the absence of like faculties. It doesn't mean that you're just like lying down in a vegetative state, but you're just not active in the way that we understand that kind of activity. um and so I feel like so many of our own notions get applied to understanding dogs, and so many of those notions go against their natural way of being, which again causes like a host of issues, right? And so I feel like so much of the work that we do is really, one, I think, inviting dog parents to see their dogs for dogs, but also through seeing their dogs for dogs, I think creating just moments of like pause, or creating moments of those reflections where you're like, oh, interesting, right? Like this is what slowness can bring to our dog, then maybe this is what slowness can bring to us. Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of like what you mentioned about Bhadra's study, because this now adds another layer which I wanted to bring up, which is street dogs and people's perception of how dogs should be, their activities, their behaviors, their social interactions or whatever, seems to stem from a very Eurocentric, Western idea of what a dog should be. And I feel like even today, people have a very hard time, like even believing that dogs are scavengers, right?
Yes.
And then when you talk about like the book, What is a Dog? And when they describe, the authors describe this dog lying around in a garbage dump, just waiting for the garbage dump to arrive. It's not like they are going and looking for food. They are just sitting around there and waiting for that garbage dump to arrive, is so um, difficult to comprehend. Because how is a dog staying so, like, in one place without anything to do? And I think these are the kind of insights we kind of get when we are observing free living dogs. But I think a lot of the notion of dogs, dog parenting, dog caregiving, again revolves around the Eurocentric, ideas. So that's the other layer of, this. But I also, now I remember what was my old point, which is um the other way that capitalism affects our dogs is that we are going for work and we are in hustle culture constantly, which means that how much time do we have to give our dogs for pure connection, not to do the chores that we think are chores, right? Like for example, walking your dog, or like feeding your dog, taking them to the vet and things like that, but like actually connecting with our dogs. We are constantly like on the move. We barely spend about 10-12 hours a day at home. And when you're not at home, and when there's no secure attachment figure, there's no caregiver figure at home, your dog is alone the entire day, they don't have someone to look to, when there is difficult situations, then that adds on as well, right? Like when is your dog able to rest if your dog is alone the entire day, being the sole person, like sole individual, um responsible for their own safety, right? In their minds they are responsible for their own safety, and then they're like awake the entire day, or like even when they're sleeping, it's not restful sleep, separation anxiety. And I feel like this is also like a little bit of extension to capitalism, because we are in hustle culture. We are like constantly on the move, working so hard the entire day, and unable to give those few moments of connection and being there for our dogs. I wonder a lot of, these behaviors that we are seeing, the maladaptive behaviors, this dysregulation that we are seeing in our dogs, could also be a result of this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great sneak peek into a future episode on the series.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I don't know why, like, it's a surprise though. In my head, I feel like I have it all chalked out in my head. I've just not communicated it to you guys.
Yes.
Yeah, I
First
think
and
that's the issue.
foremost,
Yeah.
I didn't know this was a series. Firstly,
Oh,
okay.
really? I didn't mention it. Oh shoot.
You may have mentioned like a series, and then you were like,
Yeah,
let's
you
meet
did.
on this.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, and then
yeah.
you were like, let's meet here. And then I was like, oh, this is all the episode. Like, okay, fine, this is the one. I didn't know we were doing a series.
Oh yeah. So
but
basically, the plan is that we will deep dive into different themes in different conversations. And one of the
It's great we are
conversations-
discussing this
yeah,
on
I
the
mean,
episode.
we're co-creating it. It's lovely. It's beautiful. And so one of the themes I definitely want to deep dive is how like capitalism has changed our understanding of connection. And so it makes sense that you sort of touched upon that. But I had a point which I have now completely forgotten. This is great.
it was just not me. I mean, see, I feel very bad because I have like this train of thought always. Okay. And then suddenly when it comes to my turn, and I've like forgotten it completely.
Yeah.
So it's just not me. I feel very nice.
Yeah. No, I remembered. I got it. Okay. I think it's so interesting that you mentioned this example because I think Eva asked this question in the beginning of the conversation, which is like, what do we even understand of rest? Right. And I think again, in the way that rest has been marketed and packaged to us, it involves sipping pina coladas on a beach and just like unwinding. But I think, Sarge, like what you mentioned is really, really important, which is rest can also be in the form of physical and emotional safety. And it is, right? It is that. Like when we are safe, our bodies are physiologically in a state of rest, right? And that creates so much more openness and I think even willingness to pause. And so I think about all of the moments where perhaps we've struggled to really rest when we're supposed to rest and how safe or unsafe we felt. And I think like a big part of shifting our relationship with rest is also to, I think, hold space for what does it mean for each of us to experience that kind of emotional safety, right? And that emotional safety could be jeopardized for a number of reasons outside of even capitalist systems. But what does that look like? Because ultimately, I don't think rest is about, oh, take that, like take 2 breaks in a year, right? Like, how do we integrate restfulness into our day to day life? Because that's really where the load on our systems goes lower. That's really where dysregulation goes down. That's really where we're able to show up with more presence and mindfulness and connection and support. And so I thought that was a great point to sort of bring up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Rest should not be a luxury, right?
Absolutely.
And yeah.
Absolutely.
And like we often say like every dog is an individual, like we are also individuals, so I think each of us has to figure out what resting means for us. Like for one of us it can be like watching a series, for another person it could be like reading a book, lying on the couch, listening to music. So we have to, I think, each of us figure out what is.
Yeah. And I think like it's helpful, right? I feel like it's helpful to have like a few affirmations along the way, you know? And so and I think like one of the affirmations that has been really helpful, weirdly, subconsciously in my journey also has been like just reminding myself that ultimately like I am a human being and not a machine. And so what does that really mean for me? And I know that this moves into like very like existential conversations, but like I think it's important because I think that as part of a grind, as part of the grind culture, I think that identity gets taken away from you. You get so desensitized to the identity of being human for your own self that how do you also like for me like rest is also a really great way to like reclaim that identity as much as it comes with like a lot of tension. It's still a way to reclaim that identity. And I think that especially in the work that we do around with dogs, I feel like I really do think that we're doing like spiritual work. Like I really
Yeah.
believe that through our dogs, we are also helping like dog parents heal in weird ways. You know, maybe it's just showing up like a mirror. Maybe it's just like creating moments of awareness. But I feel like, and they will have their own journey with those moments of awareness, but we're creating those moments of awareness, which I think is really, really powerful.
Yeah, I think all of us here have had that journey, right? In terms of being reminded of these things and have had like a major shift in our lives through our dogs because of because of our dogs, because of our education that involved like dog behavior, but really more of a lifestyle shift. And I think, even for me, I don't think I ever thought of rest. I don't think I thought of, like, even when I was like taking a break, right? It was not about rest. It was more of a break from working to figure out what am I going to do next. It was not about, okay, I'm taking like a break for myself and like just reconnect, you know, maybe with people, with myself, or whatever it is, right? It was never a break, break. It was of what am I going to do next? What will I do next, right? And yeah, I think wherever we are today is through our work with our dogs. And I think all the success stories we have had, if through clients, it's all that, right? Like that transformation that the humans felt, right? Of course they'll bring out that for their dogs, but I think the humans see a shift for themselves as well, and I think that is a success for us for sure.
Yeah, I think like the BHARCS way is not like this training guide, but it's like it's goes so much deeper, right? If you let it. It this will sound crazy, but like it can completely change your life, because you start not only like taking care of your dog, but also of yourself. And when you take care of yourself, you can be there more for others, right? Because if you are constantly like exhausted, there's not like you don't have a capacity to care for others, because you are barely surviving yourself. So I think that was one of the like bigger shifts with BHARCS for me. When you think you're gonna only learn about dogs, but then your whole life changes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great segue to, I think, the question that I want to sort of explore as a last question for this episode, which is what awaits us for both human beings as well as dogs when we lean into the idea of like rest for ourselves collectively.
Can I be honest?
Yeah, go for it.
For me, it's discomfort.
Yeah.
To be honest,
Yeah.
right? Like I love the idea of rest for my dogs because I can see that they they feel so much better. But if I think of rest for myself, it makes me uncomfortable because again, we spoke about this, right? When you start um having to take a pause and really look at just taking a break from everything, right? Like whatever is there around you, I don't think our minds are able to do that very well, in terms of like taking a pause, not like getting worried, not getting anxious, not like constantly thinking, stimulating ourselves. Because even when I think of taking a break, like I can't do nothing, right? Which means that I have to be doing something. And that for me, I have realized is a part of like me disassociating, right? Where I don't want to really look into what's happening, really figure out like and I'm happy doing the autopilot thing, right? Because the moment I need to take a pause and like really take a break, then I can't be on autopilot. I really have to start paying attention to what I'm feeling, what my body's feeling like, you know and that becomes uncomfortable. And I can see how a lot of people feel that discomfort, but I enjoy that for my dogs. That much. I try and then create as much as I can for them to be able to do that, but I don't know if I can also do that. And so it also comes back to the fact that, are they fully resting if I am not fully resting?
Yeah.
I think we have like a long way to go still as a society. But I think like even having conversations like this, it gets you, like, you start thinking about stuff, right? So and the more you think about something, I think the more you are getting ready to change things. So I think that's a very important first step. But I like, on the surface, it's like, yeah, of course, rest. Yes, I do this like every day. But like during this like conversation, it was like, do we even know how to rest properly?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I resonate with both. I think a lot of discomfort for sure. And again, I think, at least for me in my journey, and I was thinking of a recent experience that I had. I think so much of the discomfort is stemming from my own inability to emotionally regulate, right? Or let's say dealing with grief, dealing with like a host of things which are part and parcel of my journey. So I think, again, I think very similar to the conversation we had in dog-centered care, I don't think the idea is to attain this sense of nirvana and be like, I'm above all of these things. I think it's to, unfortunately, it is to live with the dichotomies of all of this, right? Whatever is our knowledge, whatever is our lived experience. But I do think that with rest, and I think discomfort, but also like rest also places so many hard questions on you, and how you want to live your life, who you want to be. Like, I feel like we don't think about who we're being, in a day-to-day space. Like, we're constantly thinking about what we need to do, but like really our core being, like we don't think about that at all. I mean, for our dogs, I think for our dogs, it's just indispensable, right, to their part of lives. And I think for those of us who are able to recognize that's an indispensable part of their lives, and we're able to offer them as many opportunities for rest, I feel like that's also a great step forward, right? Because even in creating those opportunities, perhaps we're learning to rest a little bit. We're learning to slow down a little bit, right? Something as simple as, I remember, like when I was doing a sleep study for back bed, recognizing how much I'm moving around the house and how that's impacting our dog's sleep, right? Like just being cognizant of, can I just sit in one place for as much as I need to, right? Like even small shifts like that can be really helpful. Or like for me, I think like a big shift I've recognized with like rest that has come is I'm able to notice the different shades and tones of green in nature, which I was just completely blind to for so long. And I'm just like, oh wow, that's a really interesting shade of green. Like I have not noticed that. Right? And I'm like, I mean, and I feel like it's also sad. I think
sad.
it is really sad. Like I feel like, I don't know how and when we've just become so like desensitized to some of those things around us, but I feel like rest allows us to get in touch with those things again. I think rest also facilitates so much more like curiosity. And so I think about like times when, like my dogs have just been like exploring or sniffing, and I have been really present, and they have sniffed too long, too hard at something. And I'm like, wait, what's going on there? I want to get in on this, right? Like, I think like it, and I think, Sowjanya, back to your point, I feel like rest also sets the foundation for so much more meaningful connection. When again, you're in that space of safety, when you're able to just pause and take a beat, I feel like that connection strengthens so much more. It allows you to read your dog so much more. It allows you to show up for them in so many different ways. So I feel like there are lots of things that await us along with the discomfort. And the truth of the matter is that the journey is like incredibly hard and incredibly challenging. And I don't think that there's any easy way to that as well.
Yeah, and I don't think any of us are there, like, you
Yeah.
know, in understanding what it feels to be actually restful. But I think I love what you mentioned of how we find moments of rest when we slow down with our dogs, because I see a lot of us doing it. But when now when I look at, you know, dog parents walking their dogs, but like are on phone, even on those moments, I can see that, you know, even the small moments of rest, you know, that we probably are feel. I think we are privileged to get those few moments of rest. Others don't even get to experience even that small thing. So I think something that I think, you know, maybe we should invite our like listeners and viewers to like think about is what is that one small thing that they can do, very small, maybe like leave your phone behind when you take your dog for a walk. And I think that can be a big, you know, shift for themselves as well. I did this, you know, the scent space that I have, you know, on the terrace, and the first day that I like, you know, set that up and everything. I remember taking my cup of tea up, you know, upstairs, and like letting, you know, Zoe and Laddu like sniff around, and even that was like few minutes of rest, right? And I think instead of looking at rest as this big, you know, 12 days of holiday, you know, like how we've been talking, you know, that this is what we have been told, that this is what rest and break looks like. Why not break it into maybe 5 minutes a day? 2 minutes a day, right? A few seconds also, just sitting with our dog and like maybe massaging. Zoe loves massaging. Sit with her and massage, and that is those few moments of rest for me for that day. And I think we don't have to do big things, at least at this point, right? Like when we are in so much discomfort thinking of rest, we don't need to do too much. If we think of it as a small thing, can itself be a big thing for us in our present state of mind.
And little things, like, they add up. Like, we all know that, right? It can be like the smallest thing, but if you are doing it every day, it adds up. I was just thinking about like my walks with Balt when he's like sniffing and like this beautiful nature around us, and it's so calm. When I come back home, I'm just like totally like relaxed, right? So
Awesome. On that note, thank you so much for the two of you for being here. I think this was like a really good chat, but it was also like a really good start, I think, to this series. I obviously missed Anushri here because I'm sure she would have had lots to say about rest. I feel like she needs to listen to this conversation 100%.
Yes.
But I will bring you guys back again to discuss other themes that are coming up within this space as well. But thank you so much, Sowjanya Eva, for this. This was amazing.
Thank
you. Can't wait.